good. So I think the last session, we talked at the beginning about cutting-edge technologies, then we talked about democracy, and then technology again. During this keynote, I'll try to bring the both of them together. But first of all, I want to thank the organizers for this great conference. I mean, it's fascinating to see so many people fascinated by the future. So thanks to them, and thanks for having asked me this question, actually, because JEDI, so where I work, yes, JEDI, so I spend approximately 50%, 60% of my time trying to ask the right questions. This is what we mean by foresight capabilities. We spend lots of time trying to understand what are the key issues of tomorrow, what are the next challenges of tomorrow. And the idea of this is to be able to launch grand challenges, open scientific competition on the next big thing of tomorrow. And I won't get too much into the detail, but you need to know that we're a non-profit foundation. So obviously, those grand challenges, they are non-profit. We are structured within 6 missions, one of them being a human-centric world, which is digital. We have 6 other ones, but today I'll focus on the human-centric digital, or as we might call it, democracy supporting technologies, or technologies with humanistic insight, because we talked a lot about the future, we talked a lot about technology, but I think it's critical to bear in mind that technology is a tool. And as we got reminded by what's happening in Ukraine, technology can be affecting democracy, can impact it negatively, but at the same time, if you have the right tools, if you're able to shape the technologies of tomorrow in the way that you want them to be, you can have democracy supporting technologies. So when it comes to the challenges of AI for democracy, I'll be talking about challenges and about what we call grand challenges within JEDI, which are the competition that we want to launch and which are the subjects that we are working on. I'll give you 3 examples, the first of which being face recognition. I like this example because face recognition is pretty easy to understand. I think that even your grandma, your grandpa might understand it, so feel free to invite them to the next future summit. But face recognition, actually, it's easy to understand because when we think about face recognition, we think at the same time about the dangers of face recognition and about the opportunities of them. One opportunity being that, I don't know how many of you within the room, but many people just prefer to log in or to unlock their smartphone with just a face recognition application instead of having to dial in, their PIN code or so on. So on one hand, it's very, very useful. On the other hand, obviously, when we think about face recognition, we can think about 1984 and Big Brother. And too often, we think that there's some sort of a trade-off between privacy and the usefulness of face recognition. But what we try to do within JEDI, and this is typically an example of the grand challenges that we launch, we try to bypass this false trade-off. We try to have both a useful face recognition, a cutting-edge face recognition, which is privacy respecting. I'll give you 2 examples on that, the first of which being face recognition without a centralized database. Because when you think about it, face recognition per se is not really an issue. I mean, the fact that I can spot someone on the 3rd row in the room, the fact that I can detect someone or just take a picture, it's not a big issue per se. The issue is when I start building a huge database of everyone within this room, and when I start to track you, when I start to exploit some of your data, this is an issue. So we try to base face recognition without centralized database. This can be hard because this means that you need to have a face recognition which has an AI which is much more powerful, which is able to give you results with much less data because it will not be storing hundreds of thousands of faces within the model. But this is the first example of what we're trying to do, which is to bypass the idea of having a centralized database in order to reconcile face recognition with privacy. Second example is having face recognition with no reverse engineering to individual data. What we mean by that is the fact that we want a face recognition that is able to have an input, to have your face in it, then to produce an output without leading it back to the input at the beginning. This means that, for instance, I would just want to know how many people in this room are wearing glasses. We will take some pictures of you, then we will count the number of glasses, and then we scrap the data of the number of people, of the faces of the people there. Obviously, it's a bit more technical when you want to include lots of parameters, lots of variables, and so on. But those are 2 examples of face recognition that can combine privacy-respecting technologies and cutting-edge AI. That was the first example, the first kind of grand challenge we are thinking of within JEDI. Second one is about self-explainable AI, or as we call it, causality, explainability of AI. For example, there, because AI is pretty much of a huge thing, even if, especially when you look deeply into it, large AI models and manipulation. So you'll see we want to build large AI models without manipulation. When we talk about large AI models, we're talking about AI models with hundreds of millions of parameters, which is great when you want to have an amazing AI that is able to do lots of things at the same time, and when you want to have clearer results from it. The issue is that you start having AIs that are so big, so huge, that you do not understand the results, you do not understand why, you do not understand the causality, you do not understand why you have these results, and this means that if someone starts to manipulate the AI, the model of it, you will not be able to understand what's the issue there. You will not be able to understand that this is the parameter that is blocking, that is manipulating the large AI model. So this is something we're closely looking at. Second aspect of grand challenges that we are on this aspect that we want to launch is about competency awareness, which might sound a bit technocratic, but actually it's very clear. Competency awareness is all about being able to understand what an AI is good at and what an AI is not good at. Because it's great when you have those AI models doing everything at the same time, but sometimes it means that they do absolutely nothing. And we need to be able to know whether an AI is skilled at a specific task. And I'll give you one example why it's important. If you think about the future of mobility that we touched upon 1 hour ago, if you think about self-driving cars, if you think about autonomous vehicles, when you will apply AI to them, you will need to be able to understand whether the AI is good technically, whether it's able to take into account ethical aspects, whether it's good at interacting with other AIs, whether or not it's good at interacting with other humans. And if you're not able to make a distinction between what they are skilled at or not, then you will face huge issues. So second aspect of what we're looking at is competency awareness. Third example is federated learning. Federated learning, it's all about having machine learning that is using a decentralized database and a decentralized amount of data and of models. And obviously, this helps you to secure the data. In order to have a democracy, I'm sure that you can make the connection. It can help you to have the data sparsed in the database in different areas, meaning that if someone is hijacking the AI, they will not be able to access to all the data there. So that's something we're looking at, especially when we think about those large AI models that I told you about, because those big AI models with hundreds of millions of parameters, they're currently either Chinese or American. And currently in Europe, we do not have exactly the capacity to build by snapping the fingers. We're not able to build those huge AI models that easily. And if you think about federated learning, if you think about having some sort of a crowdsourced large AI model, this is something that we can definitely do in Europe because we have the capacity and we have the technicity to do that. Now, last example when it comes to causability within AI, it is homomorphic encryption, which is personally, I love this one. It's a favorite of mine. Homomorphic encryption is a kind of encryption where you have encrypted data. You have someone that can analyze the data without having to unencrypt it, without having someone to decipher it. This means that in a democracy, you can be a citizen, you can be the sole owner of your data. You would have someone, a third party, be it the state, be it a company. You could have a third party that would look at this data, that would run models or algorithms on this encrypted data. The state or the company will not be able to understand the result of it. The result will be encrypted, and you will be the only one able to decipher it and to understand the actual results. This is fascinating, but currently homomorphic encryption, it's not that new, but it requires a huge amount of computing. We still need to have better homomorphic algorithms, And if you start to think about applying AI to homomorphic encryption, you're almost making it even slower, while today it's already an issue, meaning that this is something that is more for 2025 or 2030, but this is something we are definitely looking at because it might be a game changer in order to apply it in our democracies. Now, last example, which is about cognitive manipulation. I told you that facial recognition was easy to understand. This one maybe is even easier because even politicians can understand cognitive manipulation. They love to talk about it, and it's right to talk about it because it's definitely an issue that we need to keep in mind, given the current context in Ukraine. And on this one, 3 other examples of the challenges that we are looking at, and that we're trying three examples of the problems we're trying to crack. First one has to do with deepfakes. And I think that since you're all fascinated about the future, you might have heard about the deepfakes, even if it's a bit something of the past sometimes, because it seems a bit old-fashioned. If you go to conferences, I mean, every year, each year, or each month, you have someone telling that deepfakes are going to be the next big thing, that deepfakes will disrupt the next election. And might be this guy today telling you that it's possible that for the next US midterm elections, deepfakes will play a key role. It's not a certainty, but what I can tell you for sure is that our democracies need to be prepared against deepfakes. What it means very concretely is that we need to be able to detect deepfakes, to spot deepfakes in real time, in quasi-real time. Because if you take 3 days, 4 days, 3 days or 4 days to spot a deepfake, and then 3 days or 4 days to remove the deepfake online, the damages, the negative impact of the deepfakes is already being done. So we need to be able to track them, to detect deepfakes in real time. The good news there, because I want to sound optimistic, and it is very important, and I am optimistic. The good news is that we are getting better at spotting those deepfakes. We have algorithms that are much more better today. But the bad news, or the 2 bad news, is that when it comes to deepfakes, it's a cat and mouse game. It means that the better we are at spotting deepfakes, and the better the deepfake generators are getting, meaning that we still need to fund that, we still need to invest that, and to be able to be better than the generators. The second bad news is that when you look at where are the best people understanding deepfakes, where are the talents of today that are able to spot those deepfakes? Well, they are either in ByteDance, which owns TikTok, or those are Facebook scientists. And I have nothing personal against Facebook nor TikTok, but within a democracy, I think it's a bit of an issue if the best people able to understand or to track deepfakes are the internet platforms. So we need to be able to detect deepfakes in real time. We need to be able to detect in real time too deep text. This is something which is a bit more trendy, a bit more fashionable today. This is, as funky as deepfakes used to be 3 years ago. So deep text is usually about having, those large AI models that I told you about, having those large AI models that are generating automatically text that can disrupt an election or an event. And on that, personally, I do believe that it might be a more worrying issue than deepfakes for 2 reasons. First one is that it's actually very hard to spot when a deep text has been generated, for a single reason being that deep text is just a text, so you might have written it, I might have written it, so it's very difficult to spot them. And secondly, currently nobody really has the capacity to generate millions of deepfakes within a day. You need to have too much GPU, it's very difficult, but just having someone generating millions of deep texts in a day, if, for instance, we have millions of deep texts that are generated to ask the Prime Minister to go to this conference, well, this is something that could be done, and this might be worrisome for democracy, so meaning that we need to be better to detect deep text in real time, but more importantly, we need to be able to understand the correlation of the coordination of deep text when they're being used. And now we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, because obviously deep fakes and deep text, it's not something that you see on Wikipedia, it's something you see usually on social media. And we try to think about the social media of tomorrow, not the one of today. And relating to that, there are actually 3 ways, to regulate the social media, or to shape them a bit differently. The first way It's what policymakers have been trying to do. It's to regulate them by law, by some new acts. When you look at the DSA from the EU, the Digital Services Act, it's a great step forward, but it might not be enough. And it's been years and years that we've tried to regulate them, or that policymakers have tried to regulate them, but without much success. So the first approach, having politicians regulating social media, it does not really work. Second possibility is to have social media that try to regulate themselves. And when you look at the fact that Facebook is not able to understand how its own algorithm is working, that's a bit of an issue, a big issue, actually. Maybe we'll see with if Elon Musk is buying Twitter, or if he's forced to buy it. Maybe we'll see how he'll operate that, or whether or not he'll be able to control it. But so far, the approaches of having politicians regulating social media, or having social media regulating themselves, it has not been enough. And the third way, and this is a bit of a Jedi way, is to develop the social media of tomorrow. And as of today, to develop the social media of 2025 or 2030s, maybe, even if it might include the metaverse, and we'll be talking about it at the next session, I think, so I will not go too deeply within that. But what we want to do is to have social media that, for instance, are without echo chambers from their inception, having social media that have open algorithms at the very early stage of their development. So 3 examples: deepfakes, deep text, social media without echo chambers, and we all know the role of social media in our democracy and the impact of technology on democracies, and this is why we want to shape the social media of tomorrow. Now I'm coming to an end to this presentation. I'll finish it with a quote from Master Yoda, who, when you think about it, is not very a democratic figure, because the Jedi Council is very aristocratic. But the thing is that the stakes are so high when it comes to social media, technology, AI, and their impact on democracies, that we cannot allow ourselves not to do anything. And what I mean by that is that we are in a democracy, and it's great to expect from the state and from governments to do a lot, and they're already doing a lot, but it's not enough. Democracy is about civil society, it's about non-profit foundations such as Jedi, it's about myself, it's about yourself as well. So happy to answer your Q&A, your questions, and maybe engaging with you afterwards. But thanks for your attention, and hoping that you're ready to shape, as of today, the democracy of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Romain. Democracy, especially in, well, these years, you just had elections in France. I'd say a good result. Could have been worse for everyone.
I won't play it political, but we're still expecting the government of today, actually.
Yeah.
If you have.
But the question that I would have, and then we'll see if there's questions in the room as well, is what are the good things that AI can do for democracy? If you were to put 1 or 2 things that you see private companies, individuals can use to make our democracy more resilient.
Yes, no, absolutely. I focused on some of the challenges that we need to face, but we talk a lot about democracy supporting technologies, because we do believe that technologies can enhance democracies. And I mean, it's already being done when you look at Ukraine. It's fantastic, the way that they've been communicating about what's happening, the way that they've been tracking sometimes, war crimes that needs to be punished. I think the most important thing, though, when it comes to AI and to technology in general, is the ability for new tools to be able to bypass either encryption or censorship. And you have tremendous new tools that are being developed. But this is something that needs to be, and I didn't focus too much on it, it is something that, according to me, needs to be both software and hardware, because if you think about authoritarian countries, it's very easy to be caught by censorship, actually. And if you want to avoid that, you need to have tools that are private by design. And getting back to Ukraine, when you look at the impact of Starlink on Ukraine, if you think about a small Starlink, for instance, that could cost $10 and that you can send to many authoritarian countries, this could be a truly a game changer.
Anybody? One mic? Anybody with a mic? Thank you very much.
Hello. Roman, we actually talked a little in the lunch break, and I have to say that you have some great insights, and You know, I was really fascinated by the concept of deep texts and the example that you gave. What if you can generate 1 million deep texts to ask the prime minister of this country to come to this conference? Well, that got me thinking you can generate so much fake demand for politicians and other policymakers to change things with deep text, because if you can distinguish them from real individuals, then that's a problem. But what I'm thinking is that this is the way I see things, and I want to see what your opinion is. If deep texts and deep videos are going to become a very big problem, I think that social media companies and social media platforms more specifically are going to implement a measure in which people sign using their biometrics or using something that verifies them as human and something more than a CHAPTA. Do you think that if social media platforms find something, and I'm not really sure in what way, but if they could check that you're a human before you post anything, and maybe this can be done with, I don't know, with more hardware that actually can check if a human is sending that message, don't you think that that would solve the problem of deep fakes and deep texts? And
That's
the
a very
problem
short,
Yeah, thank you.
short
So-
and to the point question. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a good but tough question. I think that you could have that. You could indeed use biometrics. You could also use a blockchain, for instance, to authenticate someone posting content on the internet. The issue is that something I think at the core of democracy is the possibility to remain anonymous when you want that. And this is not compatible if you have everything that is authentic or that is biometrically checked. But when it comes to authenticity, I mean, it's not even talking about democracy, but I think that currently there's a French social media which is having a huge success in the US, which is about having to take pictures randomly during the day. And I think that in any case, you will have this kind of demand that will not only be there, this kind of demand not only from politicians, but as well from individuals. And you will have a market from that, but I'm not sure exactly, I don't know if the market share for your ID will be 100% actually.
Sure, thanks a lot.
Yeah. And we have a question from one of our volunteers, which is really awesome, because I want to take this opportunity to thank all our volunteers for making an effort and making this event happen. So thank you so much. Nobody has applauded you so strongly before you do something, right?
Yeah, sure. First of all, yeah, no problem. That's what we're here for. We want to help and to help organize everything. And second of all, thank you for your speech. My question is, do you think that this deep tech side of technology can pose a threat to society as of itself, and maybe even to our privacy?
So thanks to you and thanks to all volunteers. I need to emphasize that it's really well organized. So thanks to you. To answer directly your question, I think the issue with deep text is not really about individual. Actually, the issue with deep text is much more about the quantity. When it comes to deep fakes, it's very high quality content, and it can be tremendously negatively impactful if you see that through a deep fake your personality is harassed, or if it's falsified. But when it comes to deep text, it's actually about quantity. And I think that if you just have someone generating a deep text with 2 lines, it's not that much of an issue. The issue with deep text is that it's very easy to scale them up and to have thousands or millions or more deep text. And so this is something I think that will target much more our society or the democracies or the politicians or public figures rather than specific individuals. So it's more of a democratic than social issue, according to me.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Romain. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks to you. Merci.
It was. This is how a Jedi looks like. I don't know if you've seen.
You can be a Jedi too.